Hello, School Transportation Nation. Tony Corpin here with School Transportation News. Want to welcome you to the podcast. Guess what? It's brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing software. And we'll be speaking with Lee Bogle at Premier Wireless about ECF. And guess what? She's an expert in school bus technology solutions. So looking forward to talking with her. And also, I'm really excited to talk to my co-host, Mr. Ryan Gray, extraordinaire. He's keeping his fingers on the pulse of the industry. Ryan, welcome.
Thank you, Tony. Great to be back as always. And hello, nation. Hope everyone is doing well out there. Obviously, it's a nutso school year. I'm going to be talking a little bit later with Rosalyn Vann-Jackson, the Executive Director of Enrollment and Support Services at Broken Arrow Public Schools. That's in the Tulsa, Oklahoma area. And she's a former director of transportation at Tulsa Public Schools. So she now kind of oversees transportation as well as student enrollment and other support services. And she's going to jump on that bandwagon of folks who've been telling me lately, saying, Ryan, we've been doing this for 15, 20, sometimes 25, 30 years. And we've never seen a crazier school startup than the 2020-2021 school year, with the driver shortages, the ongoing COVID pandemic. It's just, like I said, it's nuts out there, Tony.
Yeah, I'm talking to transportation directors and I keep hearing, hey, I got to drive my afternoon route. I'm like, wow. Okay. I talked to a different one, different state. Yep. I'm driving. All my mechanics are driving. If they have a driver's license, their CDL, they are literally driving. And I was talking with Zach McKinney over at Hamilton Southeastern as we prep for ST and Expo Indianapolis. And that's going to be coming up here October 1st to the 5th. And he was like, yeah, I'm going out for my routes. And he's just like, the 3-tier system has literally saved them. If they didn't have a 3-tier system, he's like, I don't know what we would have done. So it's just unbelievable to see the industry kind of rally around, this kind of driver shortage, and everyone's pitching in. I'm not sure. It's like a Band-Aid on a shark bite. So we'll see what happens. And Ryan, with everything happening out there, it's really kind of putting a damper on people's willingness to get out and travel and engage. And I'm hoping a few of you may still want to go to ST and Expo Indianapolis. Online registration has closed, but you can still go on site and register. So we'd love to see you there in Indianapolis, beginning of October. We have the full program up on the website, full agenda. Ryan and the team have been working very hard to put that together, as well as our other shows, transporting students with disabilities and special needs down in Dallas, Frisco, Texas. It's going to be November 17th through the 22nd. You can still save $100 with our early bird, as well as STN Expo in Reno, December 4th through the 9th. We also have our Transportation Directors Summit that we put on in beautiful Lake Tahoe, California. So looking forward to all that, Ryan. Should be a good time.
Absolutely.
But I think as everybody's kind of just wrapping their head around school startup and how to get through it and manage, we got mandates coming out. We have big announcements last week from Mr. Biden. Break it down for Ryan. What does this mean for the country, for the industry, for everyone?
Well, he came out last week and essentially said that along with other entities, he's going to be requiring all private businesses across the U.S. So this is now private businesses, not school districts, not federal employees. And granted, the federal folks have a whole litany of things they have to do as well. But these companies that are 100 or more employees, they're required to have their employees get vaccinated or subject themselves to weekly tests. So similar to some of the mandates that we've seen for schools at the state level, like in California and Washington, and some stuff going up in Illinois and other places. But now this is nationwide. So this is far-reaching. OSHA is going to be writing up an emergency regulation around this. And he just made this announcement to the American people. I'm sure you all saw this or heard about it last Thursday. So, I've reached out to a couple of companies. So when we were recording this, I reached out to a couple of the very large contractors, of course, to see if they had any comment. They don't. I don't think, this is such a fluid, news, breaking news situation. I think everyone's just trying to start wrapping their heads around what this might mean. This impacts the large vehicle manufacturers, the small vehicle manufacturers, suppliers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 20. I mean, it's like everybody who has over 100 employees is going to be subjected to this thing. So, talk about putting a Band-Aid on a shark bite. I mean, my goodness, this is a gouge across, the backs of businesses. So, it was interesting when the California mandate came out over the summer, saw a release from, I think it's the California School Boards Association, that was saying, well, wait a second, school districts in California are already under a budget crunch, and now they're going to be subjected to these increased costs of managing this whole process. So
that's my big thing, Ryan, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do schools that are already stretched, now you've got businesses that are going to be stretched. Everybody's kind of in this recovery mode. And, oh, hey, guess what? What about supply chain shortages? That is having immense ripple effects across manufacturers. People aren't getting their buses on time. They're missing parts, pieces. It's causing a lot of angst in the market. And now you compound that with this. I know they're trying to, just look at that unvaccinated segment of the population, which I think the statistics I was reading was about 53% of the American population was vaccinated. So that leaves, right, what are we looking at? 37?
47% of people who are, and you figure into there's a very large segment of our population that's not eligible for the vaccine yet. Mm-hmm. So, and I write about this in one of my columns recently, and of course the numbers are fluid, and by the time you read it, some of the numbers might be outdated. But the fact remains, I believe the federal government wants at least 70% of Americans to be vaccinated, maybe more closer to 80% to kind of reach that quote unquote herd immunity. But we know, though, that is it truly herd immunity? Because with this Delta variant, we know that it's a breakthrough virus or a breakthrough variant. You can be fully vaccinated and get it. Now there's talk about the Mu variant that's out there and already making the rounds and supposedly is bad or maybe worse than Delta. I don't know. It's like the floodwaters are coming and we're trying to stick your Band-Aids on the dam there. And it's, I don't know. It's a loss for words of what's next. I think, though, that we just need to stay the course. Speaking with Rosalyn Vann-Jackson a little bit later, she's super positive, super sharp. She really, her excitement comes through of, hey, there's plenty of obstacles, but there's opportunities. It's very solution oriented. And we know transportation is a very solution oriented business profession. So, certainly the work's cut out for everybody, but, there's a very big win here to be had if we can just continue to find a way.
Yeah, Ryan, there's a lot of things happening out there. Obviously, you guys have been seeing it's winter storm season too. We've seen hurricanes batter the East Coast, kind of that the panhandle down there. There's every storm. They always got the fun names. There's Ida, now there's Mindy. Who's next in the alphabet of names, right, Ryan? We see them brewing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and those storms are hitting the Northeast too. I mean, they're going up. We had huge flooding in parts of New York and New Jersey, Pennsylvania. Affecting school bus operations up there. Did get some feedback from Apple Bus Company, one of the contractors. It has about 300 buses down in the New Orleans area, and they no big flooding of the buses, but a lot of wind debris damage. So yeah, certainly this time of year, from August through October, early November, anybody who's operating school buses along that Gulf Coast or that Eastern Seaboard, they've got to be wary of those storms, whether it be a full-blown hurricane or a tropical storm. I mean, those winds get going, it might not be a hurricane, but the wind and the rain, man, it can be bad news.
Yeah, other top headlines that kind of caught my eye, Ryan, in Indianapolis specifically, a teen was killed, while boarding their bus in a hit and run. And, these are kind of those top of mind. School startup, we're back. Here we are, illegal passing, kid gets hit, and it's a tragedy. And these are just big issues that the industry faces that seem to be just systemic. How do we tackle that illegal passing conversation? Is that better lighting? Is it, technology like illegal passing cameras? What is going to help alleviate this pain point? It just is a big thing that I continually see year after year and that the industry's kind of trying to tackle.
Yeah, in Indiana, of course, they've had some very bad luck when it comes to their illegal passing incidents over the last several years. Of course, a big one happened several years ago where 3 siblings were killed crossing a rural highway, which prompted federal legislation. So we have federal legislation on the books right now that's part of that $3.5 trillion package the Democrats are trying to pass this month, tied to the infrastructure bill. So there's a bunch of school bus safety elements in there, and one of that is illegal passing. What the feds are looking to do is evaluate a lot of those technologies that you were just mentioning, predictive stop arms and extended stop arms and AI, video cameras and whatnot. It's very akin to this driver shortage, though. I think it's one of those issues that, like you said, we're dealing with it every year. And sometimes it's better than other years. Sometimes it's worse. But where's the end in sight? I don't know. I certainly, everybody in the industry is wringing their hands and shaking their heads about that. Definitely a very big priority, school bus stop safety. And we have to remember, it's not just the illegal passers as well. I mean, just as many kids are killed or injured by their own school bus. So, it's not just an illegal passing thing. I think that sometimes is the politically correct way to look at it, but the facts speak for themselves. School bus safety as a whole, whether it's pedestrian detection, better routing, better oversight, something has to happen to ensure those kids are as safe as possible at those bus stops.
Yeah, I totally agree, Ryan. Hey, also kind of just changing gears, got my September issue in the mail. If you guys haven't checked out our brand new September technology issue, be sure and do that. And inside is a preview for STN Expo Indianapolis. So lots of good stuff in there, lots of great articles around tech. We have our tech super users. We mentioned about it a bit last week, but be sure, go on the stnonline.com website, check that out, learn more about all the peers out there, what they're doing, what kind of tech they're implementing. The conferences obviously are a great place to network and see manufacturers, see the latest and greatest products of all the things to tackle some of the big challenges that you might be facing in your operation. And, one of the major challenges, school bus driver shortage. It's real. I'm sure you already know this, but guess what? Technology can play a role in helping reduce the impact of the shortage on your district. With TransFinder's intuitive and award-winning Route Finder Plus routing software, you can find efficiencies, consolidate routes, and eliminate the number of drivers you need without any negative impact. That's because Route Finder Plus uses AI optimization. Combined with your staff's institutional knowledge, routes can be redrawn to have minimal impact on your community. Let TransFinder play a role in helping you find drivers too. Their latest webinar featured 4 drivers who love their jobs. Great resource to pass along to anyone curious about what's involved in being a school bus driver. Learn more about the webinar. Email getplus@transfinder.com and write driver in the subject line as well, so they know we sent you. Call them as well, 800-373-3609. Coming up next, I'm talking with Lee Bogle, President CEO at Premier Wireless. We're talking all about ECF window funding, Wi-Fi. Maybe you heard about it. Excited to get there. All right, guys, super excited to have Lee Bogle, Premier Wireless, with me. Lee, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Tony, good to talk to you again.
Yeah, excellent. Lee was on before with us a few months back, and we're super excited to have her back. We got some big stuff to talk to you guys about this week. So we're talking about ECF, right? Emergency Connectivity Fund. Maybe you guys heard about it. 7.17 billion for student connectivity, Wi-Fi, and there was a window application that had opened. Many people applied. Some didn't. There was a little apprehension out there. I think that people have, but there's still money available that was unused. So what we've seen, guys, is ECF open up a second funding window in late September. And so I wanted to bring Lee on to talk to us a little bit about kind of what she saw with the first wave of ECF funding, kind of what customers were seeing, feeling, what was she hearing on the ground, and kind of what are the next steps people are taking. And then, hey, for the people that maybe procrastinated, they didn't take advantage of it, and they're like, man, I should have. Here's the chance, right? You're given way more notice. You got to plug it in. You got it's like 2 weeks. So they don't give you much time. The FCC, they're giving you a lot of notice, but not a lot of time to apply. So Lee's going to, I think, give us kind of the roadmap a little bit. How does this all work, Lee? Is it like voodoo magic, or does it work well, like this ECF funding?
Tony, it works really, really well. So through the first wave, right, we worked with a lot of our clients to get everything in order, get them all the information that they needed so that they could go online and actually insert their application, file it, and be done. Literally, it takes 15, 20 minutes to file the application. And then after it gets filed, then USAC comes back and they ask a few questions. And that's the stage we're in right now with that first filing window is USAC is coming back and asking clarifying questions with the schools across the country that filed. And then after that, we expect the approvals to begin coming out. Somewhere in the next 30 to 60 days, we'll start seeing a lot of the approvals come through. But the process is really pretty painless. And at the end of the day, schools are able to fund projects that otherwise they would never be able to fund.
So I know you've talked a little bit about the advantages of student Wi-Fi, but there's also some other funding mechanisms out there that are going to allow you to kind of continue to support Wi-Fi connectivity, as well as kind of other technology on the school bus that kind of addresses the bigger issue is the COVID thing. Is it really going to go away? Probably not. We're probably going to live with this thing for a long time, like the flu, but there'll be the next pandemic or the next thing. And this is something that districts need to consider investing in because it really gives students the ability to access homework and other kind of necessary resources to better the learning process, right? We always preach the school bus as a classroom. Here is literally the opportunity to practice what we preach. And for me, if you guys are on the fence at all, this is like the second opportunity. You don't normally get second chances like this for funding. So it gets me excited to talk to Lee about this. And Lee, what are some of the other things or strategies, funding mechanisms people should be aware of if they're going to take that dive into Wi-Fi?
Yep. So let's kind of talk really quickly, Tony, about what is the technology that every school district should be looking at to fund this year, right? It is absolutely Wi-Fi on buses. Wi-Fi on buses provides internet access for the students to be able to do their homework, download whatever they need to do, study for a test beforehand. It also has the ability to provide the district, from an operational standpoint, real-time visibility to their cameras, which can so help with COVID of being able to do contact tracing. It can help mitigate violence and negative behaviors on a school bus as well. Beyond that, because there's ESSER funds, and I'm going to separate the two here in just a second, schools should really be looking at GPS, student tracking, routing software, and bringing all of that together with parent apps. So during the summer, it was so difficult to try to get this funding in because schools were on vacation. they were closed for a couple weeks. People were on vacation. Now is the perfect time. There is still over $2 billion available to fund technology for schools, and that includes transportation, right? So ECF is absolutely one way to fund that. The other option is if your district doesn't want to fund it through the Emergency Connectivity Fund, they can absolutely use ESSER funds to do that. And one of the advantages of ESSER funds is they're very broad reaching and they cover all the way through 2023. So one of the benefits of using ESSER funds is you can put together an entire technology plan for your school bus. And so our company, for example, offers everything from the bus Wi-Fi and the ability to connect the Wi-Fi to your cameras, but also we incorporate GPS, student tracking, parent apps, and routing software. And ESSER covers all of that. And some schools have looked at ESSER as being a real viable option as well, because it can fund the entire project and the services all the way through 2023. And when you combine the two, we've got some that have said we will fund ECF to cover the hardware for the bus Wi-Fi, and then we're going to use ESSER to cover the services through 2023, making sure they have the funding available to carry this for the next couple of years. And then, as we've talked about before, Tony, there is certain to be additional funding coming for the next couple of years from Congress. We're just waiting for those bills to get passed.
Yeah, I think that that's something we keep an eye on regularly. There's some student success bill out there. There's E-rate related things. So, I think, guys, as you're looking at the progression or investment into Wi-Fi, this is kind of like a no risk situation. The government has this funding for you. It's there for you to take advantage of. Second window. Lee, what's the next step someone would take if they wanted to apply? They're looking at that late September date. What do they need to do? What's the actual process?
The actual process is to select your vendor. If they want to reach out to me, they're absolutely welcome to, but select a vendor, select what you want to do, get quotes, and get them submitted. The window opens September 28th, and it's going to close October 13th. None of us expect there to be money left over for a third wave. So I think it is critical that every school district apply today and make sure they get a share of that funding for their district and their students.
Yeah, that's great. Lee, how does someone get in touch with you if they want to reach out and take advantage of the ECF funding with you?
They can either call me 281-667-0400, or they can email me at lee.bogle@pwbts.net, or simply go to our website, premierwireless.com, and they can submit a request to chat with me via the internet.
Great. Thanks so much, Lee, for coming on, sharing a little bit of your knowledge, giving us a little background. Great tech tip this week, guys. Build out that technology plan. Take advantage of those ECF funds. Second window. It's a great chance for you to get Wi-Fi on your buses for the kids, kind of close that homework gap. Think of the behavior benefits, too. Some big stuff there. Thanks so much, Lee.
Thanks, Tony.
Hey, great talk with Lee. Next up, Ryan Gray is talking with Rosalyn Vann-Jackson at Broken Arrow Public Schools. Excited for that one. Ryan, take it away.
I want to welcome to the School Transportation Nation podcast stage, Rosalyn Vann-Jackson, the Executive Director of Enrollment and Support Services for Broken Arrow Public Schools near Tulsa, Oklahoma. Rosalyn, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
So a lot of folks, I think, will know the name. You've been in this industry for a while now. Some of you who might not know are thinking Director of Enrollment and Support Services. What's that? So Rosalyn, before we jump into, there's a number of things to talk about that are currently affecting people transportation. Tell us about yourself. Give us a little background about who Rosalyn Vann-Jackson is.
Awesome. I'd be glad to. So I'm currently employed with Broken Arrow Public Schools. I have been going on my 6th year here. Prior to that, I was employed with Tulsa Public Schools. Tulsa Public Schools is the second largest district in the state of Oklahoma, largely urban school district, about 40,000 kids. I managed about 200 or so buses there, had a very large CNG fleet there, had a great team. Currently at Broken Arrow Schools, we have the same around 200 buses. We're mostly suburban and rural. Really enjoy working here as well. It's definitely a different environment. We have about 20,000 students here, and we're about the 5th largest school district within the state of Oklahoma. We have a large fleet for our secondary students. We have the largest high school in the state of Oklahoma. Last year, Broken Arrow High School, which is comprised of only 10th through 12th grades, graduated 1,300 students in their 12th grade. So very, very large high school here. Prior to working in the school bus industry and in education, I worked in human resources for several years. I loved that job and found an opportunity within a school district, which is Tulsa, to work with special needs students, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and began working in the transportation department. And to say that I fell in love with it was just an understatement. I mean, when you have the opportunity to touch and save lives, I mean, that's pretty incredible. That's like, to me, drivers are heroes. They're counselors, they're teachers. I mean, not only the kids, but the motoring public. It's just an awesome, phenomenal opportunity to be in this industry. I've had the privilege of working with some awesome people. When I became a director of transportation within Tulsa, a lot of leaders that help guide me, some of those being Teresa Anderson and Alex Robinson and Pam McDonald. I started over a decade ago in the LED program, and I've worked with them on NCST and had the privilege still to work with them in that capacity. And I've just been incredibly blessed within this industry. And the more that I work within it, the more I fall in love with the opportunities that are to, guide and direct our future, literally. It extends from the classroom to that big, yellow, beautiful bus. So that's a little bit about me. In my current capacity and role in Broken Arrow Public Schools, I don't directly oversee the school buses. There is a director that does that. I mostly work in a strategic capacity when there's big rocks to be moved, namely in pandemic times when we're doing an overhaul of our routing scheme, when we're trying to look at ways to absorb a lot of growth. Within Broken Arrow, we're growing a lot. And so that's the areas within the scope of the work that I do. But I still take advantage of being able to get out in the field. And last year, especially, I drove a lot of bus routes because I am a CDL holder. It's just what you do. In the pupil transportation industry, it's less about a job and more about, a love for your work, right? It is a labor of love. I used to think that was such a silly thing to say, but when you have such a rewarding, work, it definitely is a labor of love. So that's a little bit about me.
It's a vocation for sure.
Absolutely.
Not just a job. We hate that word just. Try to get that out of our vocabulary.
Right.
But, to what you're doing now, so to my point of, Executive Director of Enrollment and Support Services, so transportation is really kind of falls under your purview, one of the things that falls under your purview. And obviously student enrollment, and transportation can go hand in hand. A lot of what we saw going into the school year was some anxiety about what enrollment would look like, because obviously we're still in a pandemic. I keep hearing the word post-COVID. I don't know when the post starts, but there's a lot of parents out there that are, on some hand, they're like, oh God, yes, school's back open, go to school. But there's a lot of folks that are, keeping their kids home, or they're going to homeschool or private charter or, virtual academies. What are you guys seeing in terms of your enrollment? Now, it sounds like, you still are moving a lot of kids, not as many as at Tulsa, but still, where's that fall right now with your enrollment? Are you seeing any dips?
Oh, no. We have seen a substantial influx of enrollments this school year over last, and even over the 1920 school year. In the 1920 school year, we had approximately October 1st, around 19,400 students. We're at 19,600 students right now. Last year, we had a substantial drop in enrollments. A lot of people departing to withdraw and have their students attend homeschool or charter schools or online schools, whether it be public or private. And so our enrollment dropped from 1920 school year to 2021 school year down to 18,000, around 800. And so just over the last several months, we've enrolled over 1,000 students. We've had some withdrawal since, but that number continues to grow. And when you think about that, you think about students in seats, but there was some other things that were going on last year, and namely virtual, right? Not just the departures to go to virtual, but we had to really ramp up our virtual programming to fulfill the needs of parents who didn't want to go outside of Broken Arrow. They wanted to stay within. So our virtual enrollments last year increased. We went from maybe a couple hundred students enrolled in the virtual academy within Broken Arrow schools, which has been a program that we've offered for many, many years, to around 5,000 students enrolled in that program. So right now we're right at 500. So it's reduced by 90%. And if you look at it from just a school staffing standpoint, you may not need as many teachers for a virtual program, but when they transition from virtual back in the classroom, that's a substantial change in what your needs will be as far as staffing. The same thing applies to transportation. We've seen a significant influx of students because we have students that may not have needed transportation last year, making it easier for us to do social distancing, making it easier for us to do some isolation and some things when drivers may have tested positive. It just was a different environment altogether because we had fewer students that were actually requiring services, whether those services be in the classroom or on the bus. And so from the enrollment standpoint, it really has been a drastic change over the last year. And I agree with you. There's nothing post about this pandemic. It really doesn't feel that way. It's a little bit more relaxing, I'd say, with some of the mask mandates. And even those, they tend to still go back and forth. So we're definitely not post anything. I'd agree with you on that.
Speaking of mask mandates, so I believe Oklahoma is one of the states that cannot require masks to be in schools. So it's the mandate against a mandate, I guess. I saw actually that Oklahoma City schools, which I believe is the largest in the state, that they're defying the governor's order. I don't know if you hear any other smatterings of that across the state. Obviously, there is a lot of rural areas of Oklahoma, but obviously where you guys come down, there's no masks required. But what about on the buses? Is it something that's just plain, if kids want to wear them or parents want their kids to wear them?
Yes, you're right. Oklahoma, the governor did sign into law Senate Bill 658, which states that unless the governor declares a state of emergency, the boards within the respective school districts cannot provide mask mandates. Last week, I don't know if you were made aware of this, there was a judge that set a temporary injunction order on that, stating that we could. And the reason being was that only public schools were included in that Senate Bill 658 and not private. Now, what we've had to do is kind of weigh the waters, right? Because you have a very large population of parents because we're providing services, right? We want people to feel safe. We want them to feel secure. And that's really hard to do because my taste and preferences will be different than your taste and preferences. And what I think is healthy and safe for my kids, it could be really, really different with what you think, Ryan. So what Broken Arrow Public Schools has decided to do is to move forward with not mandating anything at this time, but rather allowing parents to make the choice of what's best for their kiddos by making it voluntary. At this time, we haven't taken off the table for our drivers that we would at some point if we get to a critical level and we feel that it's the best situation for them as far as safety, as far as the information that we're getting from the health department Department and the CDC. And of course, if the governor decides to declare a state of emergency, we may move to mask mandates and measures at those times, which would be in line with Senate Bill 658. But right now we're making it voluntary. We aren't doing the social distancing that we were doing before, but we are highly encouraging those things within our driver pool, within our staff. And a lot of them are obliging those requests and taking those measures. There's not very many drivers that you can drive around and see with a load of kids without a mask on. That's the great thing about that.
Aren't you glad you have an HR background?
Yeah.
Talk about, a mess you're about to step in with that one. In terms of on the school bus, though, with the kids, so no masks required. I would imagine, like, as you said, though, a lot of parents who are, having their kids wear them. So I'm sure you're seeing still a lot of masks around campus and on school buses. But what about social distancing on the buses? Is there anything changing in terms of the actual operations? Is it like, what were you guys doing last school year? What are you guys doing this school year? Cleaning? Can you do hand sanitizer? What does that look like?
As far as last year, the social distancing, sorry, I should know that word and be able to say it 50 times forwards and backwards. But it was a lot easier. Like I said, we had a very large number of families deciding to go virtual. So that made that really easy. Our numbers on our buses were really, really low. So that was simple. This year, it's not the same. And so we're back to our regular numbers as far as our loads are concerned, and maybe even a little bit higher because we are a growing school district. With regards to cleaning protocol and safety protocol, we've continued our cleaning protocol. We do cleanings between each run. So we have 3 runs, 3 tiers. Our A tier is comprised of secondary, high school, freshman academy. Our second tier is our middle school, and our third tier is our elementary. So between each one of those runs on a route, we clean the buses. And then at the end of the day, we do a thorough cleaning of all the high touch points. Interim cleanings occurred seats only.
Okay. And in terms of COVID positivity rates, have you seen any big breakouts in terms of cases? I know, some of the larger cities across America, LA Unified had something like 6,500 or 7,000 positive cases in the first 2 weeks.
Wow.
Things are obviously different in a lot of places. And, you're comparing big city LA with, Oklahoma. It's kind of apples and oranges. But I would imagine that would dictate a lot of, the decisions going forward when you're talking about would you mandate driver masks or anything like that? Have you had to deal with any of that, whether it be in your driver corps or your students, people testing positive?
Yes, we're watching that. We've been very fortunate that we haven't seen a huge influx. We did see a small influx over the last week. We went from 0 to 9 positive cases within our driver pool. We also report that on our district website daily. Right now, we're at 1.6% as a district on positive infection rates. We have about 38 positive cases out of 2,300 staff members, which is still really, really low. So like I said, we're doing really good. We have about 161 positive cases for 19,000 students, which is less than 1%. So relatively for our size, I don't think we're at outbreak levels by any means. One thing is we have a high number of staff members that have been vaccinated. And that was something that occurred last spring that helped us. A lot of our staff did get vaccinated. And so we don't see a very high number. Now, our bus drivers are, pretty high for the number that are infected within the school district. However, when you look at it at a 9 out of 200, just under 200. It's nothing like 30, 40, quarantines that we were seeing last year. It's manageable. Now, with regards to future action with positive cases, and if they increase substantially, we have a plan in place that has a 3-tiered approach to what we would do in the event that we had an outbreak. And what that looks like, a lot of people talk about efficiencies, right? And that's kind of like the buzzword. What does that mean? So what we mean by efficiencies within transportation, when we have shortages, when we have positions we're not able to fill with any given day, what we're able to do is look at the 2 main factors that work against transportation efficiencies are time and capacity. So what are ways that we can make efficiencies within our time and within our capacity. The biggest thing is centralized stops. And we've done that over the last year, which increased our efficiency. And what we do with that is we look to have our bus stops located at central locations within neighborhoods. So communals, parks, pools, things of that nature, corner stops. We've done that across our entire district. Other things, if it gets substantial, what's our next tier? What's the next thing that we can do to gain some efficiency? That next thing may be reductions in service. Do you have to walk a little further to the bus stop? We did that last year. And the third in that three-tiered approach, which we don't want to get to, is rolling blackouts or no service. On any given day, will we look at having no service within a certain quadrant, or will we have specific schools that are in no service and going virtually? So we do have a plan for what to do if outbreaks do occur within our district. And I think that that's something that we did well last year. And I think any school district would be well to think of plans that to have in place in the event that they have outbreaks, because we don't know. Again, we're not in post-pandemic by any stretch of imagination. We're still kind of in thralls, and we don't know what the future holds. So having those in place, regardless of, pandemic maybe wise, these are some of the things that we've thought about over the last 5 years within our district. How can we gain efficiency because of growth? We know that, we only have so many buildings. It's not getting any easier to get bus drivers. The age of driver has changed substantially. The pay doesn't afford us the opportunity to retain and recruit because it's just a lower paying job. We don't just, compete for our driver pool with other school districts, right? We compete with FedEx, UPS, and none of those packages and none of the mail, they don't talk back, right? and some of those vehicles even have air conditioning.
Oh my gosh.
Ours, the majority do not. So, the times are changing, and we have to find ways of doing the same thing that we're doing in a different way. And that's been the story of people transportation for many years. That's why I have such a big passion for it. I love that, that ability to be solution oriented. And we're looking at the short term, what are things to do immediately? And then we also need to look at the long term when we actually are in post-pandemic, because within Broken Arrow, we have 6,000 new home starts planned over the next 10 years. We've probably got 2,000 coming at us within the next 2 years. And so it's going to be something that for our school district we'll have to focus on heavily to be able to maintain any type of good service for our students and patrons.
And, you touched on this, but, driver shortage, recruitment, retention, where does Broken Arrow sit with its driver shortage? Because, I'm talking to directors all over the nation, folks that have been in the industry for 25, 30 years, and they're like, Ryan, never seen it like this. It's absolutely insane. There's an executive director of transportation I was speaking with earlier this morning, very large school district, very large, and he's driving a route. He's actually assigned himself a route at least through the fall. You mentioned you've kept your CDL. You're still driving. Where do you guys sit with the driver shortage right now? And going forward, you touched on a lot of the reasons why there's a driver shortage, but what's that looking like for the immediate kind of future for you guys?
Yeah, it is probably the worst I've ever seen as well. And I think it's a product of the pandemic. Again, the driver pool that we used to attract, they could use this job to supplement their income. They had a main source of income. And now, the driver pool that we're able to employ can't do that. And so we've gotten really creative, but there are no big solutions, right? Within the state of Oklahoma, we're one of the lowest in funding. One thing that we're doing is more of a grassroots approach. One of the biggest reasons that we're having a shortage is pay. But our grassroots approach is to try to get some change within our funding. We have a great funding formula, but for our pupil transportation outfit, it costs us $7.9 million. The state funds us $519,000 of that $7.9 million.
Thanks.
Yeah. And so to say that we're severely underfunded is definitely putting it lightly. So that's one thing that we're trying to do, is to try to get the word out to our patrons so that they can reach out to their legislators and say, hey, we want our kids to have the best. And so we need to make sure we have the money in the funding formula, because what happens is when we have an economic shortfall within the state, then they take the money out of our funding formula and it goes other places to balance the budget. Well, no, Common Ed needs to be funded first. Right. So if we're able to get some things done, we may be able to balance some things within our pay and structure. That's critical for us. We just won't be able to sustain if we aren't able to employ and then retain staff. The second thing is, outside of efficiency, what can we do? What are we doing now, and what can we do with the human capital and the physical capital that we have? That may mean, can we use a minibus, a Class A bus that doesn't require in your state, if your state doesn't require a CDL for that type of bus, to run some of our routes so that we can bring in someone who is willing to take a little bit less that doesn't require a CDL? Are we using our fleet and our staff across multiple types of pupil transportation? I've seen it where some people segment their operations to have SPED run purely SPED and to have regular ed run purely regular ed. And in their downtime, they're just down. Well, can we utilize those resources in time to have your SPED driver pick up some of those regular ed kids? They don't even have to co-populate on the bus. I mean, just what can we do? There's a lot about what we can do. Right now in Oklahoma, we can't pay more. We did go ahead and provide a small raise, but, that is absolutely taking dollars out of the classroom. And again, we don't pay our teachers that much either. So there has to be a balance. And I think the leadership within our school district is doing a phenomenal job of that grassroots effort to get the word out there to see if we can make some big change, because that's what's going to have to happen for us really in the state of Oklahoma. But from a pupil transportation director standpoint, the things that we can do is have an enviable, environment within our transportation ranks. And that costs us nothing. Treating people good, loving on them, making sure that the processes and the protocols that we have in place are safe for them, making sure our student management's in check. That's something that I've seen from district to district as I was a president of the Oklahoma Association of Pupil Transportation for many years and going to other districts and seeing what their biggest concerns were. It was the behavior of the kids on the bus and the management of that and support. Just saying, if you're not going to act in a safe manner on the bus where you're not a distraction to the driver, you can't ride. I mean, that easy.
Novel concept, huh? Yeah.
Right. So, those are the things that we can do and we'll continue to do. But the bigger overarching issue for us in Oklahoma is funding. And I'm sure that's the case for other school districts and pay. You can't pay people enough for what they do behind that wheel. It's a very challenging job.
Yeah, the pay that I know I've had several people tell me over the years, because the driver shortage is, has been, it's not like it's brand new. We're always dealing with it in some way, shape, or form, but it always comes back to pay. But you hit the nail on the head there with how you treat people. So that's a great segue to, coming up in a couple of weeks in our October issue, we're going to have an article in our magazine about how you can do that. I'm talking to some school districts and bus companies about how you can actually do that. So, well, Rosalyn, thank you so much for joining us today, sharing your expertise and what's going on there at Broken Arrow and in Oklahoma. Really appreciate it. I know you have your work cut out for yourself and the school district there. So you might have to be driving a bus route here in a minute, so I'll let you go. But, look for Rosalyn. We're going to try to get her into our conference lineup this fall. So stay tuned for details on that, as well as all the conference news. Rosalyn Vann-Jackson, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
Hey, special thanks to Lee and Rosalyn for joining Ryan and I on today's episode. We'd like to thank our sponsors, TransFinder and Premier Wireless. We could not do this podcast without you guys. Thank you so much for your support. Listeners, make sure you go check out TransFinder and Premier Wireless on everything they're offering to you in the technology arena. Visit stnonline.com for your latest news, expert analysis, school bus industry. Check out that September issue too. You don't want to miss it. Lots of great content in there. Learn more about our conferences as well. Tons happening. stnexpo.com for all that detail. Also tsdconference.com for our special needs conference. All that professional development that you need. Networking with your peers. I know you miss your friends. Make sure and be with us this fall. Everyone, thank you for listening. Don't forget, subscribe, stream, review our podcast. Love those 5-star reviews. You know, guys, it's all about community. I want you to share the podcast on your social feeds. Get out there, get it to your community, send it out to your friends. If there's any nuggets or tidbits, we got 81 episodes. I mean, there's got to be something for everyone if you love the school bus industry. So we appreciate you listening. We love you, nation. We'll see you next week.